The library screen is going to be one of your most used screens in Flowster. From the library screen, you can do all sorts of things. And in this video, in the first part at least, we're going to dive into the library screen and show you what's what and where's where. So at the beginning, here at the very top, you'll notice that this is a place where you can create new templates, you can create new workflows, and you can create new folders. So folders, much like they're used on Google Drive, are one way of organizing all of your content, all of your templates that would reside in your Flowster account. So you can see here the first section is called folders and templates. So if we click on view all, if you have a lot of process templates, I should say, they're all going to show up here, and you can organize them, as I mentioned, into folders, and folders can have subfolders and so forth. It's really just like organizing your material onto Google Drive as you would on Google Drive. From this particular view, if you're looking for something, you can either browse for it. So let's say you wanted to dive into the outbound marketing playbook, you wanted to build the outbound engine, etc. Or you can simply go back to your home screen if you don't feel like browsing. And if you were looking for something to do with a podcast, type in the keyword podcast, and a template is now available for you to click on. This is the most common way that you would create a workflow. So when you find the template that you want, click on it. You can either access the existing workflows that are already running. You can see here in our demo environment, I've got lots of them running. Or if you wanted to, you could create a new one. And I showed you how to do that in the demo for beginners version of this video. So if you haven't watched that, please make sure that you check it out. If you need to edit your template, you can do so from this screen. The next section down on our library screen is where our workflows are. So I'm going to get rid of the word podcast here so that we can see everything. So next is our workflows. So these are workflows that have been run, and they're all available here. And if you needed to do a bulk update to workflows, for example, if you wanted to change the user on one or many workflows, or remove a user from one or many workflows, or you wanted to archive or unarchive or delete one or many workflows, this is the place where you could do that. And here over on the left, there is all sorts of search filters to determine which workflows are going to show up here. So for example, if you wanted to look for overdue workflows only, you could click on overdue workflows and say, well, you know what? This one, and this one, and this one. We don't really need this one anymore for whatever reason. So I want to go ahead and either archive that, or maybe I'm noticing that, Smog and Bilbo's on one of them, but let's say that I know that Smog is falling behind in his work. So I could reassign these. So I could say, I don't want Smog to be on these anymore. So unassigned users. And therefore, I now want to take these same three, and you probably should have added a user before you removed a user. But in this case, I'm now going to reassign these ones to Frodo. And so we'll assign Frodo to all three of those workflows at one time. If these are your favorite, you can click on favorite and they'll share up in favorites. If you want to see all of your workflows, again, click on all of the workflows. You have the search box here up on the right that you can use. As you can see here, we've got 40 workflows that were filtered out. If we want to see all of them, we can simply clear that filter. And now every single active workflow, and you can see this is our demo environment, so we have pages and pages of them. So if you decide, man, I need to do a little bit of house cleaning, you can select all and you can archive them. And now we're going to be archiving this many workflows. It's unlikely that you would just randomly archive a whole bunch of workflows, but nonetheless, Flowster does give the ability to do that. And so there we've archived an entire page of workflows. So I would encourage you to spend some time playing around with the filters because it's a very, very useful tool. So for example, for monitoring the people that report to you. So let me give an example of that. I want to find workflows that are overdue. And I just kind of did this, but I want to find for a specific person. So let's try and see if Bilbo has any overdue workflows. So Bilbo does indeed have overdue workflows. You can see there's a number of them here. So you would have the ability now to either reassign these or open them up or change the due date or talk to Bilbo to find out why Bilbo is so far behind in his work. You can see that some of them are archived. So if you don't want to see the archived ones, you can put a tick in the active box, and therefore only the active workflows that are overdue, that are assigned, where an assignee is Bilbo, will show up. If you want us to do where Bilbo is the owner, in this case, Bilbo is a guest, so Bilbo wouldn't be the owner of any workflow. The owner of a workflow is the person who created the workflow and then assigned it to Bilbo. So in this case, I could remove Bilbo's name here. I could type in Trent. Especially if I spell it correctly, it works so much better. So you can see this is the demo division. I do create a lot of workflows in the demo division. And obviously because it's a demo division, many of them aren't getting done because nobody's working in a demo division. So I have all sorts here that are overdue. So if I decided, again, I want to do a little bit of house cleaning, I could pick all of those ones and I could go ahead and archive them all. So with these search boxes, or these search filters, I should say, that are over here on the left, you do have an immense amount of power to search through your workflows by whatever criteria that you would like. So now I want to dive a little bit more into, in the first video, I really encouraged you to look in our marketplace for templates, but now I want to walk you through the process of creating a template from scratch. So we're just going to call this my demo template, and we're not going to bother putting it in a folder. So when you create a template from scratch, you're going to see that there's really nothing that has been done yet. So by default, there are 4 tasks. These tasks can be reordered simply by dragging them around. These tasks can be removed, whatever way you would like. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to give it, so let's just say that we are making a demo template for, I don't know, cooking dinner. So step number 1 might say, thaw. And then in step 1, we're simply going to have some simple text instructions. Take food out of freezer. Helps if you spell freezer correctly. And if you had an image of that food and you wanted to include an image, you can do that. I'm not going to have a random image of some frozen food, but maybe I'll find some type of random image that I could use here. We'll find a picture of our co-founder Kane. So we'll just assume that Kane is our random food. So hey, take this food out of the freezer. And then I'm going to go ahead and create step number 2. Step number 2 might have a, microwave. So we'll just call step 2 microwave. And now maybe I decide that I'm going to, I'll grab a video here off of YouTube. Here we go. So I've grabbed myself a video off of YouTube. I paste the URL of that video that's there. I click the add button and voila, just like that, the video shows up. So that's in my microwave step of instructions. And then maybe for task number 3, we're going to put some text here. So some text here, text here. And then we're going to add another section that has a checklist, and it's going to be do this, and then it helps if you spell correctly, then this. And we don't need check number 3, so we'll get rid of that. And do we want to make this required? Yes, we do. So these checklists are actually very, very helpful when in a given step of, so let's say, eat. In the eat step, you might want to, let's make this a little bit more applicable. So let's put food on table. And then here we'll say put water on table. And we'll make that mandatory so that when someone is running through this workflow, and here we'll just run a workflow on this right now so you can sort of see. We're not going to assign it to anybody. We're not going to give it a due date. So now I've assigned this. So step number 1 is take food out of the freezer. So there's our food that's in the freezer. Okay, so we took it out of the freezer. And step number 2 is microwave, and there's this video set of instructions if you wanted to use a video on how to, maybe Martha Stewart's got a great video on microwaving and you want to include that. Okay, that step's done. And then eat. So some text here, if you wanted to include 2, 3, 4 actions in one step and you wanted to make sure that none of those actions were forgotten, that's what these little sub-check tests or sub-lists are for. And if you go to complete this step without putting both checks in, you can see because this is a required field, it's not going to let you do it. So it's just another way of ensuring your workers don't forget any of the instructions that are a part of this particular step. So now we want to go back to the template and we want to add a heading, and we'll call this heading, after dinner. And then after dinner, we're going to make a task. We're going to drag that task down to after dinner, and we're going to call it clean up. And then so in the clean up step, I want to say, who are we going to assign this? So this one here is going to be the assign or kid's name. And then after kid's name, we're going to put some instructions. Okay, so now when we go back into the workflow mode, so let's go back into the workflow. Yeah, click the update all workflows. Yes, I have one active workflow. I want to go back to it. So now you'll notice here that you can also put input fields in. Oops, I put a tick in there by accident. Input fields in Flowster. So kid's name, I mean, you could assign it to a particular user, but if kid wasn't a user and you just are, this is for mom to follow or dad to follow or the babysitter or whatever. So Johnny is going to be the kid, and we actually put that in there twice. I don't know why, but nonetheless, you'll see that you can also have Flowster collect information, and so we know that Johnny's going to be doing the cleanup. Again, hopefully by this point you're getting the idea. And again, we'll go back into, so you can kind of build your templates on the fly and then go back and forth from template mode to workflow mode to see how they look. And so if you wanted to continue to add more sections, you'll notice obviously every time you click on this that we have all sorts of, so let's give an example here of some, we'll call this special instructions. And well, we don't need all the dots in there, and we'll say that this is mandatory as well. So now let's go back and look at the workflow mode. And so under special instructions, here's this text box. It's a rich text box, so you could put and the things that you would here, the use case for this is these instructions where a user would input them would be unique to this particular workflow. If they were instructions that were going to be used on every single workflow, well, then you just would put them in a text box like we did up here, take food out of the freezer or whatever instructions it was. So in the cleanup phase, let's say we had spaghetti for dinner this time around. So scrub the pot extra well, save 1/2 of the leftovers. So these instructions are unique to this dinner where we made spaghetti and this workflow, and that's why we're letting a user put in those instructions in this place here. So you would just keep on doing that, keep adding items into your workflow until such time as you were happy with it, and then, into your template rather, until you were happy with it, and then you would just run as many workflows as required whenever you, in this case, if it was the workflow for dinner, you're going to run this workflow every single day for dinner. So now let's assume that you wanted step number 2 to be, so when you're in workflow mode, and this is on a case by case basis, and I covered this briefly in the earlier video, you could take step number 1 for dinner on, say, Monday, and you could decide, well, I want, step number 1 to be assigned to Bilbo on this particular workflow. But what if you wanted step number 2 to be assigned to Smog every single time this workflow was run? Well, you could click it manually every time you ran it, but that would be a waste of clicks and a waste of time. So it's much smarter to go into the template and assign Smog to step number 2 at the template level. And then you could also say that this is due, 15 minutes after the workflow has been run. So what'll happen is now every single time this workflow has been run, so let's go back to the workflow. Flowster is again asking us to update the workflow, which is great. You'll see that Smog is going to be responsible for step 2, and this workflow was run about 15 minutes ago. So this particular step is due in about 15 minutes from now. If you want to go in and change that on a workflow by workflow basis, you definitely can do that. But if you want to set up your assignments and your time delays at the template level, so that, because the process is the same every single time, like a great example of this, let me go over and show you one of my longer, more detailed workflows, and it's for my podcast. So we'll go in here and we're going to type in podcast. And I am going to, actually, let me just start on the library screen. It's the easiest way to do that. So as soon as the page loads, because I've got the word podcast in here, there you go. Publish a new podcast episode. So you'll see if we click on, say, the podcast for Joe Polizzi, there's lots of steps, and you can see, there's literally almost 100 steps on this workflow. And Joy has a bunch of responsibilities, and Carla has some here, and then Valentina has some here, and I have some here. Like, I don't want to have to reassign those manually every time we run this workflow. So this is a perfect use case of where all of these users have been assigned to all of these steps at the template level, so that every single time this workflow is run, the same people are doing the same things over and over again without you manually having to assign them. So now let's talk about how you can get Flowster to schedule either one-time or recurring workflows so that you don't have to remember to do that. So going back to our demo template of cooking dinner, let's go into edit mode so that we're in the template mode, and we are going to schedule this particular workflow. So we're going to call this the dinner workflow. And we're going to say that this workflow is going to be assigned to Frodo Baggins every single time. And we're going to make the workflow due after, say, an hour. And we can enter our time zone. We'll just leave it as it is and start the time that we want to have the workflow run. So we're going to say that this workflow is going to run at 5:00 p.m. on Saturday. Next step. So if you just wanted to run it one time, or tell Flowster to schedule it to be run at 5:00 on Saturday, you'd be done. But what if you wanted to have this run every Saturday? Well, then you can enable repeatable workflows, and you can decide, I want it run once a week. I want it to run on whatever days you want. It can be one or many. In this case, I'm going to say I want it to run every Saturday, and it's going to be at the same time, and I never want it to end. Actually, I want it to end after, say, 3 occurrences schedule workflow. So now for the next 3 Saturdays at the time that we specified, Flowster is going to automatically run this workflow and assign it to, I think we chose Bilbo or Frodo, one of the Baggins brothers, and it's going to show up on their calendar every single time. So now just to verify that, you can kind of hop over, have a look at Bilbo's calendar, And maybe it was Frodo that I assigned it to. There we go. Dinner workflow. Frodo. There, there, and there. So if we decided that, well, this particular one here, we want to change it, we would be able to go ahead and make the changes. So we could say, well, I don't want this one assigned to Frodo. I want this one to be assigned to Bilbo, and save changes and repeat settings. And we can just check everything off, save changes. So now you can see that all of them have been reassigned from Frodo to Bilbo, and now Bilbo is responsible for the dinner workflows that are happening for the next 3 Saturdays. Now let's talk about alert settings. So there's lots of ways to alert your team that they have been given work. Well, I shouldn't say there's lots. There's predominantly 2 ways, both the in-app alerts and the email notifications. So the in-app alert bell has not been lighting up because I'm assigning work to other people. So if I was signed in as Frodo or Smaug or Bilbo, then this bell is going to start lighting up, and you're going to see all sorts of things here that you have been tagged in. So in this case, leave a review on this. Liz tagged me and customized this. So if I click that, it's going to take me directly to that workflow. And in this case, the workflow belongs to a different division. I'm not going to switch over. Well, actually, we just switch over that division. And I'll cover what divisions are in more detail in the 3rd video. But suffice to say, most Flowster users will probably just have a single division. If you have more than one business, or you have users that you don't want to have access to multiple companies, like if you have a set of users for company A and a different set of users for company B, you'd have one division for company A and one division for company B. So let's go back into our demo division and talk about how to configure the alerts and where you're going to receive them. So you can go into your user settings, go to account settings, and then you can go to the alert screen. And here is where you can decide whether you want the Flowster newsletter or not, whether you want system emails, which system emails you want. In my case, the only ones I have turned on are where I'm tagged in the comments. So I get an email each time I'm tagged in the comments. I could obviously turn any of these other ones on. I prefer to just use the bell because I'm logged into my Flowster account every single day. So I prefer to just use the bell so that I can see what I have to do rather than blowing up my inbox with all the alerts that Flowster is going to send me when these actions happen. It's entirely your personal preference, and configure it in whatever way you would like. But just, I wanted you to know there is the 2 different ways to make those alerts appear for you. So that's it for this video. And now we've got one more video for the more advanced features of Flowster, and I welcome you to watch that one as well.